You need to unlearn being a man. She said it while passing the dressing across the table, like she was handing me a napkin. No warning, no emphasis. Just those words, dropped between bites of lentils and whatever grain she discovered this week. I looked up, thinking maybe she was quoting something, but she was serious. She always was lately. I kept my tone neutral. What does that mean? She didn't flinch. Masculinity is outdated. It's performative. You've been conditioned to lead, to fix, to take control. That's not partnership. That's hierarchy. I nodded slowly, but not in agreement. More like cataloging. The kind of nod you give when someone's handing you something you didn't ask for and can't return. My hands stayed flat on the table. I didn't reach for the fork again. She kept going, like she was on stage somewhere, speaking to a crowd of nodding strangers. We need to unlearn these inherited roles. You always make the decisions, manage the bills, do all the driving, handle the plans. That's not balance. I held her gaze. I thought that was responsibility. Her smile was soft but empty. Responsibility is a control mechanism. There it was. A clean erasure of the very traits she once claimed made her feel safe with me. The late nights I picked her up from work, the planning I did when her sister showed up without warning, the way I always knew when the tires needed rotating. Apparently, all of that was now rebranded as oppressive performance. I didn't argue. I just listened. And in that stillness, something shifted. Not anger. Not hurt. Something quieter. A disconnection that felt like stepping out of my own skin. I had been working under the assumption that my steadiness meant something. That being dependable wasn't a flaw to be cured. She shifted topics halfway through dinner, asked if I wanted to attend a relational dynamics seminar with her next weekend. I said I'd think about it. I wouldn't. After we cleared the plates, she kissed my cheek and said she appreciated how open I was being. I gave her a half smile. The kind you practice in mirrors when you're younger, testing how little you can give without drawing questions. Later that night, while she journaled next to me in bed with her favorite fountain pen, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the evening on a loop. It wasn't the sentence itself that haunted me. It was the tone. Detached. Like she'd rehearsed it. Like this was part of a script I hadn't been given. Unlearn being a man. The next morning, I didn't start the coffee. I didn't offer to drive her to work. When she asked if we were still on for dinner Friday, I said, "If you want to plan it, sure." She laughed, assuming it was a joke. I didn't correct her. It was subtle, but something had ended in me. Not love. That's not how it works. But a belief. A frame. The idea that the role I'd taken in our relationship was welcome. That she wanted who I was, not who I could deconstruct myself into. She used to tell her friends that I made her feel grounded. She used to lean into my chest like it was shelter. I remembered the way her hand used to instinctively find mine in crowded places. But now I was a system to be unlearned. She fell asleep easily that night. I didn't. That phrase stayed with me. Not like a wound. More like a compass that had just pointed somewhere I never meant to go. And for the first time in a long time, I stopped trying to course correct us. The next morning, I didn't refill the gas tank. I didn't load the dishwasher. I didn't remind her about the tax filing deadline. None of it was dramatic. I didn't make a point of anything. I simply withdrew the infrastructure she'd never acknowledged. We had built a life around my quiet labor. Invisible, not because it was minor, but because it was reliable. A thermostat is only noticed when it stops working. So I stopped working. I didn't call the roofer. I didn't schedule the oil change. I didn't plan the weekend, didn't suggest dinner, didn't check on her headache from the night before. She didn't notice at first. A few days passed in the illusion of normalcy. She was busy with her new morning ritual, journaling, affirmations, something about polarity recalibration. She played soft ambient music and wore wireless headphones at breakfast, nodding along to some podcast I wasn't invited to hear. I made no move to reach across the kitchen table, didn't offer my usual, "Anything on your mind today?" She filled the silence with theory, attachment wounds, sovereign containers, something about reparenting your inner fire. I let her speak. I wasn't cold, just present without leaning in. By the end of the week, small things began piling up. The pantry hadn't been restocked. The laundry sat half-folded for 2 days. Her gym bag smelled faintly like old fruit. She opened the fridge and said, "Didn't we have more oat milk?" I shrugged. "Maybe. I haven't been keeping track." She blinked like she didn't understand the sentence. "But you always do groceries Friday morning." I nodded, sipping my coffee. Not anymore. No argument. No anger. Just a flat decision spoken plainly. She tried a different tactic at dinner. Set the table with candles. Asked if I wanted to try that new Thai place over the weekend. Sure, I said, if you want to make a reservation. Her smile faltered. You usually book stuff. Trying not to perform outdated conditioning, I said without looking up. She laughed, awkwardly. Okay, that's fair, I guess. But her tone was off. She chewed slower. Looked down at her plate more. The lightness she tried to carry had weight under it now. That was the first crack. I noticed her phone activity shifted too. Less scrolling, more typing. Focused expressions mid-conversation. Longer bathroom visits. She started taking walks after dinner alone, saying she needed space to process. I didn't ask what she was processing, and all the while, I kept subtracting. No more reminders to bring her charger before meetings. No more instinctive shoulder rubs when she looked tired. I didn't refill her water bottle on the nightstand. She started asking, "Did you forget?" And then stopped mid-sentence, realizing I hadn't forgotten anything. I just stopped doing it. I was showing her a version of the world without the structure she'd wanted to deconstruct. And slowly, her world began to list sideways. She tried calling me out once, lightly. "You're acting different." I met her eyes calmly. "I'm unlearning being a man. Like you said?" That shut her down for the evening. The absence wasn't loud. That's what made it unsettling. She had asked for change, and now she was getting it. The form of it just didn't flatter her vision board. By the second week, she started asking me questions with that edge of irritation she used to reserve for customer service calls. Her voice cut across the kitchen while flipping through a paper on the counter. "Why didn't you reschedule the chimney sweep?" I didn't look up. "I figured you'd handle it," I said, keeping my tone neutral, letting the silence do most of the talking. She scoffed, half laughing without amusement. "You always deal with that stuff." I met her eyes for a moment, not unkind, just final. "I used to," I said, letting the past tense land like a quiet door closing. She looked at me like she didn't recognize the face across from her. And truthfully, she didn't. I wasn't performing anymore. I was showing up with stillness. And it was louder than any speech I could have made. She stood in the hallway one morning, arms crossed, eyes tight around the edges. "Why are you so passive now?" Her voice had that high, artificial calm, the kind that tries to sound like curiosity but hides a thread of accusation. I looked at her without answering right away. There was no reason to rush. No more need to fill silences that used to feel like shared space. "I'm unlearning being a man," I said evenly. "Just following the program." She blinked, thrown for a second. Then the mask slipped back on. "That's not what I meant." "I know," I said, and walked past her toward the kitchen. She didn't follow. The shift in the air was subtle, but constant. She had expected a transformation, just not one that moved away from her. Her theory had been that if I stopped asserting, stopped leading, stopped being the center of gravity in our dynamic, we would somehow arrive at balance. But balance without gravity just looks like drift. Her complaints started coming in waves. Never loud, never direct, but sharp in the way paper cuts are. "You don't check in like you used to. You're always blank. It feels like you're somewhere else." I didn't deny it. I didn't deny anything anymore. That was the difference. In the past, I might have apologized reflexively. I might have reached for her hand, tried to decode what she needed from me. But now, I let the silence do its job. When she accused me of pulling away, I didn't argue. I didn't correct her. I just watched. One night over dinner, she stared at her plate too long before saying it. "I feel like I'm the only one keeping this going." I let the bite sit on my tongue before swallowing. "That must be exhausting." Her fork hit the plate a little too hard. "That's not the point." "No," I said, "but it's the result." She didn't finish her meal. What she couldn't admit, maybe even to herself, was that she missed the structure. She missed the emotional scaffolding she claimed was oppressive. She missed the quiet way I used to hold tension in the house so she didn't have to feel it. The deeper irony? I was still leading, just not in the way she recognized. This was a quiet withdrawal, not a collapse. I wasn't disengaged. I was disciplined. She started asking for my opinion on things she used to decide alone. "Should I book that retreat in Sonoma? Do you think we should keep the second car? Is now a good time to refinance?" I answered all of it the same way. "Whatever you think is best." Eventually, she stopped asking. We sat on the couch one Friday night, while she watched some relationship coach on YouTube explaining energetic containment. The irony was sharp enough to taste. She looked over at me like she wanted me to react. I didn't. I watched the screen, silent, until she finally said, "You know, sometimes you act like you're already gone." My eyes stayed on the screen. Maybe I'm just unlearning the part that clung. She stood up without another word. The air between us was no longer tension, it was vacancy. She had asked me to evolve, and I had. Just not into someone softer or more malleable. I had evolved into someone who didn't need her approval to hold his own ground. It started with makeup. Not the kind she used for dinners out or gallery nights, but the kind she used to say was too much for mornings. Full foundation before her 9 a.m. remote check-in. Lip color on a Tuesday. She wore perfume before going to the gym, the same scent I once gave her on our anniversary. That detail hit harder than I expected. I watched quietly, noting patterns. She had always been free-spirited with routines, but now there was a ritualistic edge. Something performative. Someone else was on the receiving end of these changes, and it wasn't me. She left her laptop open one evening while folding laundry. The screen dimmed, then lit back up with a preview notification, a message from someone saved under Evo Circle, Kai. The preview said only, "You unlocked something today." Her eyes flicked toward the screen before she closed it, too quickly to look casual. I didn't ask. That night, while she showered, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened her laptop. No passwords. She used to say she had nothing to hide. I scrolled through the message thread with Kai. Not explicitly. That would have almost been easier. It was worse. Emotional excavation, coded in the language of spiritual intimacy. She wrote to him in paragraphs. Descriptions of dreams she hadn't shared with me. Doubts about our connection, framed as self-discovery. She wrote, "He's been different lately, quieter. It's like the polarity is shifting and I can finally feel myself again." Kai responded like a sage in a self-help cult. "That's the masculine withdrawing control. It means your feminine is activating." I read every word unmoved on the surface. My hand stayed steady. But somewhere inside, a thread snapped quietly. I wasn't jealous, not of Kai. I was insulted by the cheapness of it all. This wasn't spiritual expansion. It was rehearsed disloyalty, dressed in healing language. I copied the entire thread and emailed it to myself. I checked her payment history next. She had paid him, multiple times, through a shared account, coaching sessions, energetic alignment programs, even a two-person polarity container, whatever that meant. She was using our joint money to build an emotional bridge to another man, and she hadn't even bothered to change the access passwords. The next morning, I watched her sip her smoothie and scroll through the same thread, thumbs moving slowly across the screen. She glanced up at me once, as if sensing something. "You okay?" she asked. I met her gaze. "Yeah, just tired." She smiled, relieved by the simplicity of the answer. She had no idea the ground under her was beginning to shift. I made no move to confront her. That wasn't the plan. Not yet. Instead, I started creating distance in increments. I locked down our finances, shifted autopays into a solo account, moved all critical passwords into a vault. I changed how I spoke to her, less personal, more polite. She noticed. "You're talking to me like a stranger," she said one evening as I handed her the phone charger she asked for. I watched her fingers wrap around it. "Maybe I'm just speaking in your dialect." She laughed softly, unsure if it was a joke. "That's not fair." "I'm not sure fairness is still the metric," I said quietly, and walked out of the room. Over the next week, she became more erratic, swinging between sweetness and defensiveness. She asked if I wanted to do a joint reflection journal. She brought home wine. She played old playlists we used to dance to. None of it reached me, because now I had something she didn't know about, the truth, and the truth stripped her charm of its power. The messages weren't a one-time lapse. They spanned weeks, 37 days to be exact. I know because I logged every timestamp. Morning affirmations, midday check-ins, late-night personal disclosures, each one carefully framed as growth, but layered with flirtation so practiced it bordered on script. He wasn't just a stranger. He was a coach, someone she found through one of her podcasts, a man who spoke in metaphors and boundaries and wound mirroring. His job, officially, was to help her expand into sovereignty. Unofficially, he was another orbit she could float toward, away from the gravity of our shared life. She paid him out of our shared account, $275 per session, 3 times a week, extra charges for voice notes support. She never asked me, never mentioned it. I found the invoices buried in our digital banking history. Her description on the payment tags? Polarity guidance. I didn't react. I logged everything. Screenshots, receipts, voice recordings from her phone when she left it connected to the speaker system. All of it quietly cataloged. Then I called the bank, split the checking account into a personal branch, transferred my direct deposit, left enough in the joint for appearances, a few bills, groceries, her streaming subscriptions. I didn't want her alert. I wanted her comfortable. At home, she still tried to act normal. She wore looser clothes again, as if to reset the equilibrium. She cooked on Thursday night, something we hadn't done together in weeks. Laid out 2 wine glasses, put on jazz. I sat across from her, watching her pour the wine. Her hands were steady, but her eyes weren't. Feels like we're in a better rhythm, she said without looking up. I nodded, watching the way the candlelight curved across the rim of her glass. Yeah, rhythms evolve, I guess. She took a sip. I think all couples need space to expand. The way she said it almost made me laugh. Not bitterly, just at the absurdity. Is that what we're doing? I asked, voice even. Expanding? She nodded too quickly. Exactly. I've just been working with someone to help me explore. Yeah, I said, cutting gently across her words. I know. Her eyes froze on mine. Just for a beat. I didn't push. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a confrontation. I let her think the moment had passed. That weekend I packed a travel bag. Not a dramatic suitcase, just enough for 3 days. A single document went into a sealed envelope. Printed messages, financial records, a timeline. Saturday morning, I left it on the dining table. No explanation. No note on the outside. Just the facts, waiting to be seen. I checked into a quiet Airbnb 2 towns over. No missed calls for hours. Then, around 5 p.m., my phone lit up. 3 missed calls. Then a text. What is this? Please call me. Please. I didn't respond. By Sunday night, the messages shifted tone. We need to talk. This isn't what you think. Then, you're being cruel. Cruel. That word stuck in my chest for longer than it should have. As if drawing boundaries after betrayal was somehow the injustice. When I returned Monday morning, the house was still. I walked in through the garage. She stood in the kitchen in the same clothes from yesterday, hair tied up, eyes red. She didn't yell. She didn't sob. She just said it quietly, like the words were folding in on themselves. Is this how it ends? I looked at her, not with anger, not even sadness, just with the tired clarity of a man who'd held the mirror long enough. You asked me to change, I said. You never expected I'd grow away from you. She followed me through the house, barefoot, voice trembling but still quiet enough to sound composed. Can we just talk? Please. I didn't stop walking. I moved through the living room to the closet and started folding what I'd left behind. 2 shirts, a pair of boots, the watch she gave me our second year. No speeches. No drama. Just collection. She stood near the doorway, arms folded like she was bracing for cold air. This isn't fair. You blindsided me. I zipped the bag slowly. No. I just stopped shielding you from the consequences of your own choices. She stepped closer, like proximity could shrink the gap between us. That wasn't betrayal. You saw those messages. They were about growth, not. My voice was calm, almost clinical. You paid another man to explore emotional territory while hiding it from the person you were committed to. You shifted the definitions to fit your actions. You built an emotional world I wasn't invited into. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, eyes wet now. It wasn't about replacing you. I just needed to rediscover myself. I met her eyes then, finally. You could have done that without using my money, hiding it, and building a relationship behind my back. She flinched. The word relationship landed harder than she wanted to admit. Her voice cracked. I felt alone. You pulled away. I closed the bag. I stopped doing things you told me were oppressive. And the second they were gone, you found someone else to fill the vacuum. She reached out, fingers brushing the table. I was scared. You changed. I changed. I said slowly. Because you told me I needed to unlearn the man I was. You just didn't think I'd unlearn being your man. Silence. She sat down, finally, in the chair closest to her. No more defenses. Just breath. Shallow, uneven. I miss who we were. she said, like memory was a safe house she could run back into. I nodded once. I miss him too. I didn't ask for anything, not explanations, not revisions of the past. The document had done all the work. The dates, the receipts, the contradictions stacked neatly into sequence. She hadn't even tried to deny them after the first failed attempt. Not really. Her strength had always been emotional camouflage, wrapping harm in soft philosophy. But this time, she ran out of script. Before I left, she asked one last question, and it came from something real. So what now? I paused at the door, hand on the frame. Now I rebuild. Without your terms. She nodded slowly, tears sliding down in silence. There was no fight. No screaming. Just the aftermath of clarity. And the empty sound of a philosophy that had just collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions. She didn't chase me this time. Not physically. Not with last-minute apologies or rebranded intentions. But the aftermath lingered like ash after a controlled burn. Silent, persistent, woven into everything. The first week after I left, she tried to hold the narrative. Her social media turned poetic. Quotes about brief as growth, and releasing old patterns, photos of sunsets, yoga poses. No mention of me, but enough subtext to draw sympathetic comments from people who didn't know better. But then the real story started to surface. The coach, Kai, the enlightened guide who had promised her expansion, wasn't exclusive in his guidance. I knew because I hired a private firm to do a background dig. He had 3 other clients with near-identical message patterns. One of them had already filed a complaint. Another had posted anonymously in a forum, describing him as someone who staged emotional closeness for payment. I didn't out him. I didn't need to. I just made sure the screenshots and invoices I'd saved landed quietly with the right people. 2 of her close friends. Her sister. A therapist she once trusted but hadn't seen in over a year. That's when the silence shifted. The subtle distance from her circle began. The friend who always reposted her wellness quotes stopped replying. The sister didn't return a call. The stories she had rehearsed so carefully, that I was emotionally withholding, that she had grown alone, stopped finding open doors. She reached out once more mid-month. Voice note. Said she was sorry. That she hadn't realized how far she had drifted. That maybe Kai had been more about validation than guidance. She said she missed the stability, missed being seen. She didn't ask me to come back, just left the door open in her tone. I listened. I deleted it. No reply. The legal side was clean, mostly because I kept it that way. We weren't in a contested asset mess, but I still had an attorney review the financial statements and record every withdrawal she made post-separation. She tried to stall closing the shared account for emotional readiness. I gave her 48 hours. It closed in 36. She moved into a co-working apartment a few weeks later. Posted about it like it was a personal retreat. Minimalist furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows. A caption that said, "Sometimes evolution is painful, but necessary." I didn't comment. By the 3rd month, we spoke only through legal intermediaries. The car was transferred to her name. The utilities restructured. Everything reduced to signatures and delivery confirmations. What lingered more than anything was the silence that followed her departure, not just in the house, but in me. I didn't miss her presence. I missed the version of me that had once believed in us. The man who thought loyalty, structure, and effort would always be recognized as love. I missed being that certain.